Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Benjamin Wang. I started a little company a couple of years ago called Nevap. Nevap stands for Never Ventilator Associated Pneumonia. And we are trying to create a new standard in invasive mechanical ventilation. It's a field that hasn't really improved a lot for the past 80 years. But we have something that we believe can change that and improve care for millions of Americans and hundreds of millions of people all around the world. This is a breathing tube, and if you haven't seen this before, it's placed between the mouth and into the airway. And if you look at the curvature, you can imagine if somebody is salivating or if there's things that are being created in the nose or they're regurgitating, once that stuff is around the in contact with the breathing tube, it'll end up in the airway, leak into the lungs, and cause really nasty complications. And what COVID is doing is it's showing us something that basically most pulmonologists and critical care specialists already knew before the pandemic, which is when you put somebody on a breathing machine with a breathing tube in place, their risk of pneumonia goes up 600 to 2,000%. What we didn't know is how bad that would be with COVID-19. As of this year, we do know. There's a lot of ventilator-associated pneumonia and complications in COVID patients. This European study that was just recently published shows that there's about 50% of COVID patients on mechanical ventilation develop what they call a ventilator-associated pneumonia. And that's really bad for them because they're already very sick and they're usually in the ICU at that point. Now, to date, many of these big companies have tried to improve upon this. They've created these devices. They're all breathing tubes with a single suction port right above the cuff. The problem is this ends up causing a lot of key problems for both the clinicians and the patients because they don't work very well. And if you talk to your respiratory therapist and your pulmonologist, you'll find out there's a lot of blockage. You don't get a lot back. They oftentimes will pull blood or cause trauma to the airway. And when the patient is repositioned, as many of them are during this time, the suctioning doesn't work at all. On top of that, they're only used in the ICU. They take a lot of labor, and they don't protect the clinician. So what we're seeing is this. We are using these tubes right now on the front lines, and we see nearly 100% tissue entrapment and bacterial leakage into the lungs. This tube is actually taken from an actual COVID patient, and you see that gray, blackish gunk? That's not supposed to be there. It ends up causing a lot of logistical problems, financial problems, and mortality problems for the hospital doctor and patient. We created a logical breathing tube that uses 24 ports to provide the suctioning. And what that does, it doesn't get blocked by tissue. It doesn't cause trauma, and it's continuous infection control from the emergency department to the OR to the ICU. And what that also means, it's currently being used and turned on in all of these settings. This class of device in general has been shown to reduce the pneumonia rates, reduce respiratory needs, reduce time on mechanical ventilation, conserve on medication use, and reduce mortality. That was all before COVID appeared. Now, right here, I have the the results of an experiment that was run by the UCSF Lung Research Institute. And what they did is they basically put this into a living model, and they were able to track how much fluid they were recovering from each one. The first four you see on here are two different settings with the market leader. Medtronic owns about 95% of this market. What you see on the very right is the Nevap device that is already being utilized at UCSF. Now, the market for this, as it stands, is not particularly large. You have about 1.5 million ICU patients. We may have a couple more this year due to COVID. But in general, the market, as it stands, isn't very large because you can only use this class of tube inside the ICU, supposedly. But we're changing that. Our device is actually being used all over the world in 4 different continents right now. and it's being used in the OR, ICU, and ED. Some of our customers are coming back to us and telling us that it's something very different for them in terms of their clinical practice. And that's affected something else, which is our bottom line. I'm not going to disclose to you what our profits are or what our revenue is. I can tell you that we are growing. We are growing, and COVID is responsible for that. Something other exciting news I'll tell you in a little bit, but just to let you know, Q4 was our best quarter so far, and we are working diligently to make Q1 of this year better and save more lives. We have a very experienced team of medical device professionals. Jim Bayer was the former CEO of a respiratory anesthesia company called SourceMark. He grew the company to about 600% in 3 years. He is very excited about joining us. We have very good, interesting advisors and a fantastic board. You might recognize some of these names. Now, this is the really exciting thing. In October of last year, a group of doctors in South Korea proved that if you use this type of infection control strategy in the OR for cardiothoracic patients, that you could reduce the rate of pneumonia in these patients by 600%. And they were using the market leader, the Medtronic device, and our device is clearly better than that device at this point. We've been able to displace the market leader at numerous hospitals all around the world at this point. We're pretty confident that we can find champions who are going to start using this device actively in the OR. Many hospitals in the Bay Area already use this device in the OR. They just are not able to turn it on. Ours is the only one that you can safely turn on without pressure regulation. That means some big things for invasive mechanical ventilation, because as it stands, the device is set up to do this, to basically improve invasive mechanical ventilation for all OR patients that could benefit. Now, they don't all have the same high risk. Pulmonary procedures have very high risk. Lung transplants have some, but even orthopedic procedures like knee replacements, there's an appreciable risk of postoperative pneumonia in there that we can address that nobody else can. We believe there's about 15 million patients here in the United States every year that can benefit from our procedures, from our device. But globally, there's another 30 million additional patients who undergo high-risk major procedures, many of them open, that are at high risk of getting postoperative or aspiration pneumonia, that we can also help. And finally, if the button's right, sorry, the button's moving. There's a large unmet clinical need that we can address all around the world for people who are having breathing tubes placed for anaphylactic shock, to basic routine OR procedures, to just, having the bad luck of ending up in the ICU. And that's happening every year. So I can tell you more about where we're going and what you're going to see and all the other products that are in our portfolio that can be adapted with this type of design and technology. I can tell you about how many patents we have issued and where we're going next and which countries are going to see it. We help a lot of people right now in the EU, but I'd like to help more patients here in the United States. So I'm not asking for money at this point. You're more than welcome to inquire about investing in Nevap. But what I'm asking for you is, we all know somebody who is on the front lines. We know family members are in the hospitals. And every day when I open up the news, I see a new record that we are setting in terms of deaths. This is something we can deploy rapidly. It's FDA cleared and being used in hospitals in the United States. It's just not on the GPO contract. And most doctors do not know that there is a better breathing tube out there. I'd like to change that with your help. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I invite you to ask me your questions. So I'll stop sharing, or do you want me to leave this up? You can do that.
You can leave that up for a minute. Perfect timing. You've got 13 seconds to spare. Great job.
Oh, that's what practice does for you.
Exactly. All right. So Questions from the judges?
So Gary, I'm perplexed. Ben, why this isn't really hasn't taken off? This is a great, serious need. What is holding it up? Do you need some sales folks? Do you need somebody with relationships with GPOs? What's the holdup?
I right now I sell 5 tubes to the EU for every one that I sell here in America, and the reasoning is I don't have a sales force. I don't have any other than a GSA contract and a group of distributors. I don't have anybody selling this device day to day here in the United States except me. The way things are going, and we're going to reach our break-even point sometime this year. But the real focus for me is I'd really like to save more lives here in the United States. And it's a terrific business. I don't know if I was on the previous slide, but as the pricing goes, we match the price of the existing device out there already, and our gross margins are approaching 90%. There is plenty of room to make money and save lives. And the data, if you look at the data and what people are doing out there, this is not an argument. There is meta-analysis data out there to support the use of this class of device. And I guarantee you, once you use 3 of these devices, you'll figure out exactly how and why this is significantly better.
So I guess the question is, this is anesthesiologist / venture capitalist. Clearly this is one of those solutions that, yes, the pandemic has created maybe a greater awareness and need, but this is something that's been a problem and continues to be a problem for as long as we've been intubating patients, especially for long term. So I heard you say that you're really not looking for investors, but then I hear you say that you don't have a sales force. So explain maybe, sounds like you need more money if you need a sales force, or, what's your plan there? If I'm an investor to put money into this company, what would you use it for?
Well, there's some interesting research that we want to do with Yale. We have the attention of a Dr. Mariam Treghiari. She is the world's foremost expert on subglottic suction endotracheal tubes. Uh-huh. She has our device. We need somebody to kind of help support her grant writing and activities there. If we hire a sales force right now, I'll tell you the truth, they can't get into the hospitals. Right now, at this current moment, what we are seeing is there is enormous adoption simply because there are shortages of the large size tubes. Mm-hmm. So hospitals are buying through some of our distributors simply because they can't get anything else in the size that they need for patients. We're really trying to get the word out there as much as possible.
Benjamin.
So
Benjamin.
Yes.
My name's Chris Kager. I'm a partner with Gary in the Global Health Fund and Network. One of my good friends is a critical care pulmonary attending at Yale. So if you need a little extra push on the Yale side of things, and I'm in the Penn system, and it seems like this would be something that they would at least be interested in looking at.
Absolutely. I would really appreciate your help in that. Because I'll tell you the truth, things like this have fallen tragically and traditionally fallen into a category of commodity equipment that most people don't think can be a solution. There aren't a lot of people looking at the data. As everybody is telling everybody to stay home and wear a mask, I'm telling everybody, look at the data behind subglottic tubes. This is not a fairy tale. This equipment actually makes the big difference, and it's very, very cost effective, because if you consider one of these devices can, on average, reduce the time on mechanical ventilation by 2 to 3 days per patient. We're looking at tens of thousands of dollars.
Benjamin, let's address some other questions I want to give, because we only have about another minute. So just kind of brief answers. So have you approached UCSF? For example, it's been asked here, UCSF hospital contracted, yes or no?
Yes. UCSF Zuckerberg Hospital is using our device.
All right. Do you have a chief marketing officer?
No, we do not. I have 3 marketing interns.
Okay. So sounds like you might need one. Let's see. What's the cost compared to a regular endotracheal tube?
It's about 10 to 15 times more expensive than a regular endotracheal tube. It is the same price, cost comparative to the suction endotracheal tube.
Okay. And then have you at all approached the military or the armed services or the Defense Department regarding?
We have through some VA contacts, but not directly. We are on a GSA contract with a distributor.
Okay. Well, there's certainly a lot of interest here. So, yeah, why don't you just as an aside, we'll continue the conversation. But when we ran out of time, it was a great presentation. Obviously, the product speaks for itself. Let's go into our voting poll phase and see what the audience thinks.